Hello, everybody. You've made it to the final session of day one of our fall virtual conference. Huge thanks once again to Encompass Technologies, Belter, and Gorman Smith Beverage Equipment for your support. We appreciate all of our presenters and thank you for tuning in. We're winding our day down with how to write a brewery job description. Nationwide, breweries are experiencing staffing challenges. Breweries are not only competing with each other for talent, but also big box retailers often offering comparable pay with less responsibilities. In this conversation, we're about to speak with our panelists on how to create a job description that will attract candidates, what to include, and discuss best practices with regard to transforming a potential hire into a valuable employee. But before we dive into all that, let's meet our guest. And because you are to the right of me, Lance, you get to go first. Tell everybody a little bit about what you do and why this topic is important to you.
Sure, yeah. So I am the head brewer for Bright Penny Brewing in Mebane, North Carolina. Before that, before my wife and I moved here a few years ago, I'm from Colorado originally, and I've been working in the craft beer industry for close to 20 years. I've been a GM, I've been a head brewer, I've been pretty much everything. So obviously trained and hired a lot of employees throughout that time.
Lance, you were very proactive when we were looking for people in this conversation, so I'm really excited for your insight today.
Appreciate that.
Katie, your turn.
Hi, I'm Katie Rado. I'm the general manager at Trace Brewing in Bloomfield, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And Katie, why is this topic important to you?
So this is actually my first job in craft beer. However, I think retaining good staff is super important, and that's what I'm mostly going to speak on today.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Justin, your turn.
Hey everyone, Justin Riopelle, former head brewer at Detroit Beer Company, where I was at for 13 years. And now my current background is in HR and industrial organizational psychology. And I'm currently at Bosch. So I left the brewing industry, went corporate, but I'm still very passionate about staying connected with the brewing industry and talking about these topics that very much affected me while I was in there.
Yeah, really looking forward to your perspective on this one too. Thanks for being here. And Kyle, you're doing double duty today. I enjoyed your session earlier day, and now you're back.
Yeah. So for anyone who didn't catch the talk this morning, my name's Kyle. I run a hardware site for breweries called gormansmith.com. But for this talk, I also teach at the brewing school, and my class is normally what is called the industry class, which is how to survive the brewing industry while working in the brewing industry.
Well, I'm excited for you to be on this panel as well. I think it was you and we had a conversation probably a couple months ago discussing about the hiring practices and brewery descriptions, and you were passionate about this one. So this is going to be a fun one to have you join.
Thank you.
Stephanie, your turn. Good to see you.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me. So Stephanie Vavonese, I started BrewRecruit, so we do recruiting and are constantly writing job descriptions and looking at job descriptions and resumes. So hoping I can add some value to this call.
So from this point on, we're going to kind of start with the job description and all end up with retaining your employees. So let's begin. What are the key elements that should be included in a brewery job description to make it attractive to potential candidates? And we're going to open the floor, unmute yourselves. Let's dive into this one. Key elements to make a job description attractive to candidates. Who wants in? Justin.
I would say first talking about kind of the difference between job description and I'm assuming job posting, where it's actually out there for candidates to see. I think starting with biopsychology, this is an especially important concept in HR, is job analysis. So starting to figure out what the job actually entails, gathering all the relevant tasks and duties of that person, and taking this long list and condensing it down into the essentials, putting that in the job posting, and really making sure that it captures accurately what's going on, but also that the posting captures the mission and the values of your organization or your brewery. I think I would stay away from any generic things, because that's reflective of your culture. If you want to attract people that work for you, you really want to convey that in that job posting to attract like-minded people that are going to support your vision and mission.
Let me add to this. I think one thing which is really important is to be aware of how are people reading your job descriptions? Where are they going to see your job descriptions? And, I just sat in on a thing with Indeed. So I use Indeed a lot, and I would encourage you guys all to do that, Brewbound Indeed. But one of the biggest things is they are saying that everyone's looking at the, as you can imagine, looking at job descriptions on your phone. You get 15 seconds, maybe 20. So I really want to encourage people not to really thinking about, you have to put everything on the job description, because why are you writing the job description? You're writing the job description so they click to apply. You don't want to deter people. You want to get as many applications as possible. So you got to have your culture and a good feel to it. Like, don't be stiff in the job description, but don't have it be too long. They say, like, legit, they were saying my intros were too long, and they had like 4 to 5 sentences in the top paragraph, and like, it's too much. It's really bullets. So you might want to almost think about this a little bit backwards. So I'd encourage you guys to go and see what your competition's doing. Go on Indeed. How long are you looking at a job description before you pass on? And making it really simple to click apply.
Stephanie, I recently read the book Smart Brevity by the people who do the Axos newsletter. It talks about how literally you should just get rid of all extra content and just get to the point sometimes. And what you described just now sounds exactly something out of that book.
Yeah, I just think sometimes when we write job descriptions, we think they're doing perfect. But at the end of the day, you need to get the candidates to apply to evaluate, and then you sell.
So Justin, I want to go back to you for a sec, because you mentioned job description and job posting. Talk to me a little bit about what's the difference, and should we kind of put different brains on when we're thinking about each?
Yeah, I think that Stephanie really hit kind of what I was going for, is that you start the job description from, I guess, a job analysis standpoint. That covers, you're looking at the position for everything that's entailed, the what, how, and why. And you don't want to throw all of that out there in the job posting. Like Stephanie said, you want to condense that down to the most meaningful elements of that job. And you're saying, sell that job. You don't want to list every single thing. But that's going to give you a good idea for the job description. I would think of as more of an internal tool, whereas the job posting is more of an external tool. The job description can help you have all of those tasks listed so that you have an idea of what you're evaluating that worker on. So if you're doing a yearly performance review or something, you can go back to that job description and use that internally to evaluate a candidate. But like Stephanie said, there's a decent amount of marketing in the actual job ad itself. So I think switching that mindset of thinking of it really is another piece to your marketing. So, yeah.
Now, Lance, I know you were about to say something earlier. I'd love to hear, from the brewery side of things, what do you like to include in a brewery job description to make it attractive? Or what have you seen that you've thought falls into that category?
Yeah, sure. So as far as the details go of the job description, I don't think it's necessary to to Stephanie and Justin's point, it's not necessary to say, oh, you're going to dry hop this, you're going to do this, that, whatever. I really liked how Justin put that just now, how that's more internal, right? It's kind of, have something to go back on to kind of talk to your employees about later on. But as far as, that external kind of view, I think it's really important to narrow down what are people actually looking for when they're applying. And let's be honest, most of the things that these people are looking for is things like salary, benefits, pay, compensation. What is the work culture like? They're going to look at your job description and they're probably going to click on your website, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, to kind of see what that culture is actually like, to find if it's a good fit for them. But things for me right off the bat that are huge, obviously salary compensation, especially on my side of things. Our industry as a whole kind of struggles paying people really what they're worth on the brewing side of things. I remember when I first got into the brewing industry in Colorado, it was very competitive. And it was kind of the norm to volunteer to wash kegs, et cetera, get your foot in the door. And to me, that's always kind of been something that's, especially this day and age, and now that I'm older and, I just had a baby and starting a family, those things are really important to me. So to know kind of what you're getting into and to have that competitive salary price, I think is a huge win for a company. Because if you're not posting it, to me, that's usually a red flag. Some other red flags that I typically see are like, instead of having like real benefits, if you're posting things like having a shift beer or discounts on merchandise, it's like those should be a given. A benefit isn't a shift beer. So to me, those are just kind of things that I would avoid. So sometimes it's not about everything that you're putting in, it's what you're leaving out as well.
Lance, just to follow up on that, so Indeed will tell you, most of these sites will tell you if you're going to post, people can search. I think you really want to also learn, how are people searching for jobs? So one of the things is they're going to be searching by salary and salary bands. So in Indeed, you can have it out there so people can see it, or you can put the range and have it private. So as long as people are searching through those bands, the job will still show up. I'd always recommend putting a salary band in, okay? It gives you flexibility. If you have relocation, put it in there. If you have healthcare benefits, that's a selling point in the beer industry, right? Make sure that's out there. Like, what are people looking for? To Lance's point, it's benefits, and most people don't have it, and fair comp. So it also takes the awkwardness out of the first conversation. So I'd absolutely agree with you there, Lance. Oh, and then one other thing is titles. Make your titles really relevant, right? The things that people are looking for. It's fun to have creative names, but even Indeed will kind of give you an idea if you can put different titles in and how many people are out there with those titles looking. So take advantage of those things so you make sure you're using the right title, because that's, people are getting email notifications if the title's in there.
Thanks, Stephanie. Now, Katie, I've been lucky enough to visit your brewery twice in the past year, and I'm really excited to hear your feedback on this one. So what are some of the strategies that breweries can use to assess and communicate their company culture in job descriptions to find candidates who are a good cultural fit?
Great question. So we are pretty fortunate, I will say, that we haven't had to put out like a job search for front of house. Anyway, I hire for front of house. It's always kind of been usually what happens at Trace is I'm like, hey, we have this big event person that I know. Do you want to come work this event, and make some cash? And they're like, yeah, sure. And then I'm like, actually, do you want to just work here now? And like that's how, like, I know I'm very fortunate in that way, that we have a lot of good supporters and folks around us that want to work at Trace. And but conveying that culture, I think, as Lance said, they're going to look at your Instagram and Facebook, and they're going to see what you're all about. Like, if you're boring, maybe that's not for everybody. But if you like to celebrate Snoop Dogg's birthday, you can come work at Trace or whatever.
So, Katie, how do you take, you're lucky enough to find people that way, but how do you kind of make them aware of your job description for the roles they're taking?
Great question. Typically, it's a brief conversation with myself, and then we'll have them on for a training shift, and they feel good about it, and we feel good about it, then that works for us. It's pretty laid back.
Now, I'd like to go back to something that Justin mentioned earlier, because it's so interesting, Justin. You mentioned that, a job posting is marketing in many ways, and that's fascinating to me. So, looking at it from that perspective, how can breweries highlight their unique selling points and that company culture in these job descriptions to stand out? Because we're all trying to stand out, right? But what are some tips that you have? And Kyle, kind of start thinking about it too, because I love your feedback on this one too.
Yeah. So I'll start off with, I guess, a sort of tale of warning. So everyone's really excited about AI, things like ChatGPT. I had recently come across a job posting that felt very stiff. Going back to that point earlier, felt very stiff, robotic, and it just seemed very off. So I opened up ChatGPT. I told ChatGPT to write a job posting for that same position in that same industry, and it was restaurant brewery type type operation, and it spit out pretty much the same exact thing as what was posting. So I essentially found someone using ChatGPT to put up a job posting. And for me, that even without verifying that technology was used, to me, I would personally, if I were looking for a job, I would stay away from that, because I think that conveys a feeling of inauthenticity about that brewery. So I think that's a cautionary tale there. But on the other side of things, to attract people, I think it doesn't hurt to, if you have a creative department or a marketing department, or even if you do that in-house with part of your ownership team or whatever, I think having a comprehensive package of tying in some of the things that you're out there doing, if you're working in the community, make sure that you highlight that both in your social media pages and in your job posting as sort of your employee value proposition, saying, working here is also an opportunity to connect deeper with your community, conveying that in some way. If your job posting seems like it was written by a robot, job candidates are probably going to pick up that they might be working for people that are robotic, and that's not a good cultural fit for them. So,
yeah, I think early moral of the story is there's a lot more to hiring someone than just reading that job post. They're going to look deep into your brain and see all the messaging you're putting out there to the world.
Yeah.
Kyle, what's on your mind?
Well, in marketing, we have that term, the ideal customer, and we make a little diagram we want these types of people to buy from our brewery. And there's probably a good lesson to pick from that, because a job posting isn't just filling the role with someone, it's filling a role with someone that's going to be an asset to your company. And if you attract the wrong type of person, you're either not going to find the right candidate, or you're going to hire someone and then maybe fire them, or they quit within 3-6 months, and then you're back at square one. So trying to figure out how to tool the message of the job description to the type of people you want working there. Just like Lance said earlier, there's a lot of easy ways to do red flags and a lot of easy ways to do green flags, and trying to put as many green flags on that description and making sure that what you're looking for matches the requirements. So for example, I remember someone gave me a job posting and they're like, hey, can you post this on the college and see who would hire it? And it was just for a entry-level brewery job, but they're like, must have a university's degree of biology and this and that and this and that. And you're not going to find someone for that role, because you're asking, you want this type of person, but you're messaging for that type of person. And having an ideal staff, jotting down for 5 minutes, just be like, this is what my ideal brewer or tap room manager would look like, would probably help a lot in figuring out how to write the overall job description.
Take it, Stephanie.
So Kyle, that's a great point. So when I'm working on a client's job, typically I won't even look at the job description. The first thing I'm going to do is have a job order intake. I have a list of questions I ask. One of the questions is, all right, what are the primary responsibilities? And in an ideal world, what's the ideal background this person would have walking into the door? Then walk me through what a typical day is like for them. And then if I was interviewing, what questions would you be asking me? And when you put it like that, I literally can almost go verbatim, and then I go write my own job description. If you just take a different mindset when you're writing this, and don't worry about it having to be a formal job description. I think people get it in their mind that it has to be a certain way. But if you take it back, and I would say you really want 5 to 8 bullet points for responsibilities, and see how you can consolidate things. Dry hopping, mashing, cleaning the lines. You can put some things together and not go into as much detail like Lance was saying, but still put it out there. And then about 5 bullets of responsibilities. And you don't want them to be run on, but if you can really make it short and sweet and think big picture, because Katie, as you're talking about, when you're interviewing them, you can go deeper. But if they're not applying, you can't hire them. That's the biggest thing. It's just like the resumes, your ticket in the door. Your job description, your job post is just like you're talking about, Justin, is the marketing piece. It's the commercial, because we're going to assume people know your brewery. Most likely, a lot of them don't, especially if they might be switching careers.
Really good insight there. Now let's go dive a little bit deeper into something Kyle mentioned. Kyle, you mentioned, how breweries often require a diverse skill set from employees. How can these job postings, everyone, effectively communicate their responsibilities while also ensuring competitive compensation?
Well, okay. I think I'm going to start with the compensation first and then going into the responsibility second. So one of the most common questions I get from students is, well, how much money am I going to make when I graduate? And that's where I have to be able to try and give a decent answer, because it's not always like I don't have exact numbers. The brewing industry is pretty diverse in terms of what it compensates, and I kind of have to advocate for them a little bit. Here in Canada, we have a third-party organization, and what they do is they give recommended living wages. What a living wage means is 40 hours of work. That means you can afford the apartment and transportation and groceries in that city. So I have to advocate. And if you're washing kegs, if you are just pouring beer, you have to at least go home with that much money. So figuring out how to, obviously it's like we need to be able to generate revenue from that labor, because if we're not making any money off of it, we're not able to do it. So figuring out how that person can push the business forward with each of their responsibilities and making sure that that compensation is fair to their overall tasks. If you need someone, I remember a few years ago, there was someone who basically wrote a job description for a biochemical engineer, and they're like, we expect you to be able to design our brew house equipment on the fly, and this and this and that and this and that, and then it basically was like $2 an hour above minimum wage. So obviously they did not get a lot of applicants for that role, because they're expecting huge amounts of skill sets that were not completely necessary for the overall day-to-day activities, and then not even compensating anywhere close to that.
Thanks, Kyle. Anyone else have something to add on this one? How to make sure those responsibilities match the compensation range?
Yeah, I'll take that for a minute. I think that's something that we have an inherent hard time with in this industry, because a lot of us, whether we are, front of house, taproom managers, general managers, or back of house or whatever, we're asked to wear a lot of hats. It's not like we just have one job. I mean, for instance, in my brewery, I do our labels and stuff, and I do 100 things. It's not everything that was actually included in the job description. And what's interesting about that is you want to find these employees that can do a lot of these different things. Putting that all into the job description is nearly impossible. I think kind of training people up to that, and kind of once you hire them and finding their strengths and saying, okay, maybe this person's more creative or this person's very analytical, and kind of putting those people where they need to be, and not just promoting them on this kind of path that you think they should be. Like, okay, you start as a cellarman, then you get to be a brewer, then you get to be this. Like, okay, well, maybe sit down with your employees and actually see what are your career goals, and I see these strengths in you. Let's talk about, where we can utilize you the most, and seeing what works for both of you.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that, because you talk about like career goals. And Stephanie, something tells me you probably have really good insight on this one. How can job descriptions convey opportunities for this career growth and development within the beer industry?
I think, I typically will do it in one of the last sentences of my summary at the top. I will say they like to promote from within, support career. They will they encourage, professional development, and they will pay for additional training. People want to see that, right? If you're going to invest in them, put that up there. If you're doing Indeed, if you're doing LinkedIn, there's also a way to click all these additional things. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be in the job description as you're thinking about it, because if you're posting on Indeed, LinkedIn, most of those sites will have the opportunity to add those things too. But I like putting it in the opening paragraph, because if that's what they're going to read, and maybe they don't have that formal job description, but you'll do it. Another thing is, I think, like having a mentorship, showing they have internal mentorship programs, so you know that people are taking a vested interest in you.
Lance, at your brewery, you mentioned like you'll have conversations with your employees. Could you give an example of a conversation you had with someone maybe on your team, or maybe during the hiring process, where you learned that they were looking for more than just whatever you initially were offering?
Yeah, absolutely. At this brewery specifically, I had had a guy recently. We had a opening for kind of an entry level brewer, so cellarman, assistant brewer, that kind of range. And I had one of my front of house guys who is super excited about it. But honestly, after we got talking, he's very creative, very charismatic, got a big personality. He does tonight. He'll probably pop by. He's doing our music bingo and everything tonight. We started talking, maybe you're more suited for something like sales or something like that. Like you have this really great mindset and everything, and just this way with people, like maybe you should be looking more towards that route. So we kind of sat down and talked about it, and honestly, he really got a big kick out of it because he had never really considered that an option.
Thank you. Anyone else have anything to add on this one? So let's go back to the process. It's a lot more than just submitting an application. What is all of your advice for setting expectations on the hiring process? Like, we don't want the candidates to come to an interview and then say, well, then what's next? Like, how do you set these expectations so people know what they're getting in through when they're just hitting that apply to job post initially on Indeed up until the point they get hired? How do we set those expectations?
I think one of the things that I've learned after leaving the brewing industry is the importance of an initial phone screening, just to clear some of those basics. So if you get a pool of candidates, kind of narrow it down as you're setting up those interviews. Just bringing up some of the basic things of the job. So like Stephanie mentioned, if you have relocation or something like that, talking about if that candidate is across the country, discussing things like, is the interview going to be virtual or in person? Are you going to support that candidate from coming out of town? What their timeline is? Discussing some of those basic logistical concerns up front can prevent you from getting to the interview, getting past the interview, sending out the offer, and then coming to find out that there's something holding that candidate back from getting there. So I think setting some of those expectations and being clear about what you need as an employer is important up front.
But Justin, if we only have 15 seconds to capture someone's attention, how do we do it?
That's a good point. You mean in the actual job posting? Or?
I think either. I think when people are applying for these ads, they're often curious what the process is going to be like. So I think it's somewhat of a challenge, setting these expectations, whether it's the job description or the job posting. People want to know, how they get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I think though, they don't need that on the job description. To Justin's point, and two things. Like, I think if you find a resume, so some people aren't used to writing resumes, right? So you have to take them with a grain of salt. I ended up placing a guy who worked for one company for almost 20 years. His resume had 2 lines on it, but he had great tenure. I called him up. This guy had been promoted 6 times, had all these responsibilities. Someone else would have passed over him. He was one of the top candidates my client had seen in the 3 months that they were looking for it. So I called him and asked him to walk me through his background. So much today, people are rushing to fill, jobs, and they're just kind of what you're talking about, Justin, just kind of going robotic, right? AI crap and all this stuff. They're not having the personal touch. The reality is today, companies need candidates more than candidates need companies. It is a candidate market. So you need to sell to them. Don't assume they're going to know all these things. I want to make sure you guys have the personal touch. As soon as you find a resume, call the person. If they look at all good, because it might not all be on the resume. You can learn a lot. So just keep that in mind. It's the candidate market right now.
Now, Stephanie, what's the timeline from your perspective look like from someone applying to a job for hearing back to that interview? Are there certain standards we should abide by?
I'm going to tell you, speed to market right now. It's so competitive. When people apply, it goes right into my inbox. If they look good, I'll call them within 2 minutes. Don't need to wait. They're excited. They're interested. They just looked at it. Because if they're applying to you, they're probably applying to other places. So don't wait. And don't feel like you're going to get 10 candidates to choose from. Today, you're lucky if you have 1 to 3. And that's really the reality. Don't rush to make a decision, but don't wait to get a lineup of candidates to call.
No, let's go back into some platforms you can use for hiring. Stephanie, you mentioned Indeed, you mentioned Brewbound. For everyone else here, what are some of the tools that you use as part of the hiring, onboarding process that you found valuable? Anyone have any wins for sites or platforms that have been really valuable in finding candidates?
LinkedIn is also a great one.
Yeah, we use Indeed a lot. One thing that we started going in North Carolina, which Colorado had for a while, was our local Brewers Guild has some job postings and stuff as well. So very industry specific, but it also, if somebody's looking on there, they're already pretty much what you're looking for, or at least, in the ballpark.
Now, let's dive into a tough one. I imagine because we have people from all over the country and in different countries at that. Does anyone have a response to what legal and ethical considerations should breweries be aware of when crafting these job descriptions and recruitment strategies?
Yeah. So a couple thoughts here. I know we've been talking about compensation. So one of the things is being aware of laws. I know, especially a lot of breweries out in Colorado, there are requirements to post salary ranges out there. I think Washington, New York. So that's increasingly a thing. So making sure you know what your salary is going to be, and it's good practice to put it out there before you need to. But I think that's one legal consideration. Two, going back to that point about some playful job titles and whatnot, I think you want to be mindful of, and this is kind of the HR side of things, but being mindful of picking job titles, parts of your descriptions that actually accurately reflect the job. I know that the brewing industry is a lot of fun. There's a lot of joking back and forth, but this is an area that you need to be pretty serious about because there can be pretty serious legal repercussions. Making sure that your language is gender neutral. Saying something about the guys in the brew house do this or something like that. You got to be cautious of that and be mindful, especially if you have a culture of inclusion and diversity. You want to reflect that in your job posting and also be compliant with the EEOC. A third point would be being inclusive to those with disabilities and making sure that you're taking steps to reasonably accommodate anyone that might need that. Figuring out the essential parts of the job. Let's say it's you're running a tap room and you have a POS system or something like that. Someone might have a visual impairment, and there might be reasonable accommodations that can help them adapt to that position. So making sure that you know what is essential to perform whatever position you're hiring for, and making sure you know what's reasonable so that you can broaden your applicant pool and not be found to discriminate against anyone as well.
Now, Katie, at Trace Brewing, you all have created such an inclusive space. How can breweries promote diversity and inclusion in hiring practices? And, do you reflect this in your job descriptions? Add on, I'd love to hear a little bit about the workforce development program that you all have as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So in every meeting that I ever have with staff, we talk about gendered language and just a friendly reminder to keep it inclusive and not say, hey, guys, offer some other suggestions. As far as our vocational program, I think we've on our 5th vocational participant right now, Natalie. The only thing that's required when folks apply for that is their name and why are they passionate about brewing. We don't ask them their age, their high school diploma. We don't require any of that. We don't ask them if they can lift 50 pounds. We don't require any of that for the vocational program. We just ask them what is your passion for beer? Why do you want to be in this industry? And then we review all those. We ultimately interview about 10 folks typically, and then we pick from those candidates.
How many programs have you done already?
I believe we're in 2023. This is part 2. So I believe Natalie's our 6th participant.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Now, let's dive into the part of the conversation I think everybody is really excited about. You've got your candidate hired. I'd love to hear a little bit about best practices to ensure they become valuable long-term employees. We're going to talk some retention here. So everyone, I just kind of love to hear some of the best practices. I know it's very open-ended, but you all come from such unique perspectives. I think it's going to open really good dialogue right now. Not everybody at once, please.
Yeah. I think it's a conversation. For me, the brewing industry is so unique, and you have so many different, you have tap rooms, brew pubs, those located in suburban, urban, rural environments. Breweries that have hundreds of workers versus breweries that are kind of bare bones or owner run and manage. It's kind of all over the place. So I think one of the best things you can do is have perhaps stay interviews with your employees. Just have a casual conversation, see what motivates them, what drives them, and what you can do either as an owner, as an HR professional, support them, as a manager. Figure out what's rewarding to them, not what your idea of a reward is. That could come in the form of, maybe it is a discussion about compensation. Maybe it's something about professional development. Maybe it is a career change within your brewery, to Lance's point. Maybe there's a better fit for you to either cross train you or move you into sales from the cellar or something like that. So I think keeping an open line of communication and creating a psychologically safe place for people to feel comfortable talking about what they want to do. There are some employees that might be really dependent on that specific position and feel fearful about losing that by expressing an interest in something else. So I think having an open line of communication and figuring out what drives your employees is a good route to, when you're seeking to retain them.
Yeah, I would agree with Justin there. Keeping an open mind, I always have the feeling that everyone has their strengths, and that the strength of each individual is totally different based on their past experiences or whatever their home life is like. So keeping an open mind and continuing that conversation, keeping the conversation open, ask staff what they need to succeed. I always tell my staff, what do you need to make it better? I will order it for you. How can I be helpful? So yeah, that's been clear.
Katie, what do you do at Trace to get to know, everyone's expectations and their goals and their situations best? Do you have any strategies that really work well for you to kind of find their strengths?
They will normally tell me, or it'll come up in a normal day's work. Trace, we do a lot of block parties and offsite events. So those people kind of just told me like, hey, I really like doing offsites, or I don't really like doing offsites. So listening to them, just hanging out. I'm always sitting at the end of the bar. It's my office, on my laptop, chatting with staff and guests. So it's just to be around them, I think is important as well.
Can I add a little to this?
Always. Okay.
So I thought about this. One of the things when I worked at a company is as soon as you came in the door, you got partnered with someone. Not to necessarily be a mentor, but kind of a mentor. They took them out to lunch their first week, gave them their cell phone numbers, took them out, after month 1 and after month 3. So you develop this sense of community right off the bat. So it kind of made it comfortable, not exactly, maybe a peer, someone right above. So it's more neutral. I'd say actually more to peer level is best. So they get buy-in and they feel like they can have conversations that might be awkward, or maybe it's a stupid question, but it makes it easier. The other thing is, I actually just talked about this with some other folks. One thing is some people need more flexibility, and you talk about you want a diverse work environment. Well, if you have a single mom or a single dad, but I kind of think there's not a lot of women in this, right? Do they have to be in an X amount of time? Or can we work with people to get their kids on the bus or kids home? Does it have to be in these hours like we've thought about? So it's another thing. That's why someone might be leaving, right? They're stressed. They can't get the kids home. They can't get off the bus. And they feel this fear that if they don't show up, they're going to be walked out the door. So Justin, neutral, comfortable environment, like keeping that open conversation. They're going to be family oriented, supported across the board. And two other quick points. One, a lot of the times people are going to leave companies because of their manager, not the company, the manager. So I would really encourage folks to invest in their managers. If you see they're not doing great, take them and give them an opportunity to get professional development as a manager. And it'll help the entire team. It'll have a trickle down effect. And then the other thing is, it gets awkward. Maybe there's an elephant in the room or there's something going wrong, to have the hard conversation. People avoid the hard conversations, but I really think, one bad apple can have other people leave. So have the hard conversation with someone. I often say take that out of the office, go grab a beer. Funny, yeah, in the beer industry, but go off site, make it a neutral environment, ask them really what's going on to figure out what's happening, and then talk to them about the elephant in the room, or if there's a way they can adjust course, because it's going to be affecting everyone. And you can probably see it. So don't let it linger.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I have a little something to add. It's maybe a little bit different than what we're talking about, but something that I've found that's really valuable during training is trying to train not just the individual tasks, but more like the big picture. And one thing that I really like to say is, somebody said it to me once, and it really clicked with me, was I train all my guys the why behind the what. And it really works in the brewery side, but I'm sure it can translate to taproom sales, whatever. When I'm training somebody to dry hop a beer, for instance, and I'm not just telling them, hey, you're going to add 4 pounds per barrel of this hop, and we do it this way, and it's black and white. I'm showing them, hey, we're doing it this way because we don't want oxygen pickup. We don't want this. We don't want that. And in the end, it's going to make this wonderful product that we're really proud of. And being able to show them how important each of those steps are to the big picture, even if it is something as little as washing kegs. If we make this incredible beer, but then it goes into a keg that's not fully purged of CO2 or fully clean, et cetera, we dropped it at the goal line, and our product isn't exactly what we were intending it to be. So kind of getting that buy-in from staff, of having that almost management ownership mentality of them seeing like, hey, I want to make the best product possible, and I know not only what to do, but why we're doing it, has given me some of the best success with my staff. And it's been really, really cool.
I really like that, because that's putting meaning behind the job description. You read it, it just says dry hopping, but you're taking it to the next level and like giving them some personal, investment in it to understand why it's necessary.
One of my first jobs, we did job shadowing. And that's like the same idea, Lance, right? If you're going to bring someone in sales, have them shadow you, have them shadow someone else, so they can see firsthand and answer so many questions. And they have that also, the buy-in and that connection. It's all about the connection. And yeah,
absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point, especially if it is like a job shadowing. So let's say it's not even me training somebody, but one of my lead brewers training an assistant brewer or something. When they're explaining that topic, it really kind of just reinforces that knowledge as well. And so they're kind of both just learning at the same time. And I think that's really valuable.
Now, Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I have something I want to add. So one of the pieces of informal homework I give my brewing students is the next time you're at a beer, like this is after the Ministry of Labor talks, I just say, and we covered certain elements that are required by OSHA, which is both in the U.S. and the Ontario Safety, so it's just the same name. But I'm like, okay, see if you can find a first aid kit or a PPE station or those bare minimum legal requirements that every business needs to have in your home turf. And so, but when you're bringing someone in for the first time, I think it's important to cover those still, because I think it's if you're under a year of experience or at that job, you're the most likely to get hurt on the job. So making sure that they know where everything is, like from the keys specific to their job is to the PPE, making sure the PPE fits properly, making sure that they know where the first aid kit's in, or if they need to call an ambulance, how do they do that? Because it's not always the same city to city, or like even building to building. Some phones will be like, oh, you have to press out this number before you can dial out. So those small things I think are just super important to capture early, because they normally get overlooked, and we don't want to be scrambling when there is an instance that we have a violent customer in the tap room, or someone's hurt themselves. We don't want to be trying to learn that stuff in the middle of the crisis.
No, I agree, Kyle. I'd like to ask you another question, Kyle, because you've been in the industry for quite some time in quite a few different roles. What are some strategies that you've seen breweries implement for retention that have been really, valuable, that you've either, experienced yourself or have seen breweries do that you've interacted with?
Sometimes it's tricky because different people always want different things. You have people that are going into doing the shift work just to clock in and clock out, and then you have the people that ultimately do want to run facility someday or learn more about the industry. So I think giving people ownership of small things really helps, because if they feel like they're actively making the company better on a day-to-day basis, they're probably going to stick around. And then educational opportunities are probably a really good one, because I know as soon as I got, like, when I was a head brewer, I said, hey, I want to go to this conference. Like, it seems really interesting. It's not too far away. I just need the time off. And they're like, well, you can use vacation time if you want to go to that conference. And then I'm like, you know what? If these guys don't believe in me, I'm probably going to go somewhere else that will. So I think knowing that there's ways to build and rebuild skills, because the people who are brewing and serving your beer, they're the ones that are going to bring in the revenue. And if you don't invest in them, then why would they invest back in the company?
I think it may be somewhat of a rhetorical question to ask all of you in this room today, but how important is professional development in these job descriptions and to offer people on your team? Stephanie, when you see people, look at these job postings, are they looking for future opportunities, ways to grow their skills, or is it?
I think it's a conversation after. I think you put it in there. We pay for professional development. That's we support and pay for. We provide professional development. That says that you pay for it, right? And therefore you're supporting it. I think it's important. I think it's a great way to retain people. You can put them through school and you can ask them to stay X amount of time. It's almost your buy-in. You get a level of commitment once you do it. So that's retention and building the company culture. And if people see you're doing it for other people on the team, they're probably more likely to think you're going to do it for them. So think about that. Part of a strategy for long-term. And, recently I placed 2 brewers, right to your point, Kyle. In the job offer, we said, and we will pay to attend these 2 conferences. So it was in there. There was no question. And they felt great walking in, because it's an awkward conversation to have down the road. Oh, do I have to take time off? Oh, are you going to pay for it? Oh, am I going? Am I invited? Right? So take the awkwardness out and have them look forward to it. And it's more of a bonding time.
Now, to go back to where we started this talking about job descriptions. Sorry to change up there, Stephanie, but when we start talking about job descriptions, what someone's hired for, what they might end up doing a few years down the road, it may change. It's probably going to evolve. How often should we look at these job descriptions and really update them based on the candidate or what the position might entail?
I mean, think about, I do it all every time you post it. Is it stale? Is this really what's happening? Like, what's now cool? Like, how many barrels are we doing? Like, where are we selling? How many states are we in? Like, update it and keep it sexy. It's the marketing piece.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Stephanie. I think every time you post a position, it's great to have sort of that either if you're a recruiter for a brewery or external or whatever, having that intake meeting to just, even if it's a couple quick minutes, to look through and say, oh, this doesn't quite fit anymore, or we've actually changed this. And that just goes back to speaking accurately about that position and setting those accurate, expectations up front.
Justin, to that point, like if you're like, I can't figure it out if it's the right thing, ask the person on the floor doing the job. Walk me through the typical day. Take some notes. Is it on the job description or is it completely different? If it's different, you're going to get the wrong people.
Yeah. Incumbents are going to know that job the best.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting there. So, looking at ways breweries can measure the effectiveness of these job descriptions and hiring strategies, do you all have any metrics or indicators that you recommend? I mean, let's even say, for example, you put a job posting or description out there, it just falls flat. Are you looking at it again and making some tweaks to it to better reflect the message you want to convey?
So I'm posting jobs all the time. So a couple points to this. If I'm not getting candidates, I'm going to take it down. I'm probably going to change the job title. Maybe I'm going to tweak a couple things. But so if it's up for like more than 5 days, it's getting stale. So take it down, refresh it. It's going to be pushed out to everyone. Okay. That's the biggest thing that you might not know. If you repost it on Indeed, if you're going to repost it on most of these places, it's going to get resent out. So maybe put it under a different name. See what your competition's doing. Just literally go Indeed, hit brewery and the keyword and see what's coming up. But one of the things we just haven't talked about is this is all passive. This is all people posting resumes. We haven't talked about going out and finding people. Still use LinkedIn to find people. Still use Indeed. Do your own search. If you tap someone on the shoulder, it's far more likely to be a better fit and they're going to be interested. And you can do that both on Indeed and LinkedIn. Get your people talking. If you have a job, post it internally. Let people know. Ask them who they have. Ask for referrals. Like, that's a great way to bring diversity in. That's a great way to get other people who wouldn't know. Ask for referrals. Maybe give a bonus to get someone else in the door. A private beer tasting with friends. If you help us fill this position. So look outside. I know that the job posting is great, but if the whole idea is to find really good talent for you, and it's all about timing and being effective, think outside too.
Thank you, Stephanie. Does anybody else have something you'd like to add to that one? Now, we've talked a lot about today, everything from the job posting to the description, to hiring practices, to retention. I love each of you all wear unique hats in this industry. I just love to hear that one final takeaway. If a brewery owner or manager is listening to you right now, what's one recommendation that you have for them? And Lance, don't get too mad at me, but you went first, so I'm going to put you on the spot right now. And what's that one thing you do at Bright Penny that you would recommend to others in the industry?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's actually really important. So this is something that kind of probably means a lot to me. One of the biggest things that I would recommend people do is really take a look at your business model and see what you can actually afford. We have all different scales of companies within this industry. Right now I work for a pretty small 10/20 barrel brewery in a small town in North Carolina. We are asking people to be rock stars at their jobs and wear a lot of hats and stuff like that. But if you can find those people, compensate them appropriately. Because if you can get somebody that does the same amount of work, mind you, we're not looking to burn people out. We want them to have good compensation and be happy and healthy. But if you can find somebody that can do, twice the work of a normal guy, like we've got a pizza kitchen here, and I've got some guys that can absolutely just sling some pizza. And if I got one guy that can sling twice as many pizzas, but I can pay him 1.5 times more, well, then all of a sudden that gives me more room to pay my other employees and hire more people. It's also a really small kitchen, so we have only so much space and we need to make the most out of our space and our labor. So I think really looking at, your employee turnover, your labor costs, those kind of things are very important to know what you can actually afford as a company. Because a lot of times people try to kind of nickel and dime on the employee side of things and they get more staff than maybe they actually need, but they're paying everybody minimum wage. If you can get some really good, strong people that'll care about the brand, you get them benefits, health insurance, that kind of thing, they're going to be invested for you for the long haul. And everybody's going to live a little bit of a happier life. So that's kind of my big soapbox, if you will.
Thanks, Lance. Excited to meet you in just a few weeks in Carolina.
Yep. Likewise.
Katie, we're taking it around the circle. Your turn.
All right. Can you repeat the question, actually?
What's just a recommendation you have for other brewery managers and owners with regard to anything in, hiring practices?
Thank you. I would say be open to people, in your community, in like the neighborhood that you are in the surrounding communities that may not necessarily be in your personal circle or anybody circle. Reach out to other breweries, other like-minded businesses that share similar values with you, and see what they have going on there, and see if there's anything that you can collaborate with, and also listen to your staff.
Thanks, Katie. Justin?
I would say kind of, I guess, reiterating just the point of why we're all here today is not being afraid to reach out when you have questions or concerns, or just to get another look at what you're doing from either a compliance aspect, a diversity, equity, inclusion aspect. Reaching out, and if you have a job description or you came up with one, just getting another set of eyes in it and using your network in the industry for help, because that is one of the reasons I was attracted to this industry, and one of the reasons I want to stay engaged with it is that it's such a collaborative industry, and I think that's what is a huge, beautiful theme about what we do.
Thanks, Justin. Kyle?
So I think this is one of those instances where if you have like a decent enough plan consistently, you can almost, when you're writing the job description, it's pretty easy to ask yourself, well, who are people that might be interested in this role? So if you're active in the local brewing industry and you're going to the conventions and you're doing those sort of things, it's not too hard to ask a friend who asks a friend who asks a friend. They're like, oh, this person would be perfect. And that's what happened with colleagues of mine. Is another consultant. He basically said, hey, do you know any brewers that are in this city that need this work? And I just said, yeah, the head brewer from this other facility just quit. I don't know what happened, but he's looking for that sort of work. And he was hired. He's been there for almost 5 years now. So obviously it was a good fit. But if you know who you're looking for, it's pretty easy to identify those rock stars in your industry. And like, there's only so many people that really work in the craft beer industry. It's still small, but making sure that you're doing this consistently and reviewing what you're doing, it makes it a lot easier to find the people long term.
Awesome. Thanks for the insight today, Kyle, and appreciate all your support on this conference. And Stephanie, you get to take us home.
Wow. Okay. So
many things you want to say right now, I know.
No, I would just reiterate, it is a candidate market right now. Please make contact with folks quickly, sooner than later. Sell the job. That's your goal. Get them excited about the company, educate them on it, let them know why you like being there. And then to your point, let them know next steps and move quickly. Keep it exciting. And lastly, guys, I really can't encourage you guys enough, and gentlemen and ladies and folks, just to really don't wait for people to apply. Go out and find people.
Yeah, good takeaways, everybody. And everyone, thanks again for joining us for our first day of virtual conference. We've got 2 more. So Lance, Katie, Justin, Kyle, Stephanie, appreciate the conversation today. You offered a ton of insight out there. Everybody can go back and rewatch this. If anyone would like to reach out to any of you, would anyone like to share their information if someone would like to reach out with any questions or just for a conversation?
Yeah, you can reach out to me at recruiting@BrewRecruit. If you guys want to know how to use LinkedIn or Indeed to go find people, it's really easy, and it can be intimidating if you don't know how to. So I'm happy to walk folks through it.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thanks again for being here today. Justin, did you want to jump in?
I was just going to say, jumping off the LinkedIn part, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, send me a message, and I'm happy to talk with you.
Well, appreciate you all. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.